The sin of Cain and the curse of Cain are serious business. They are still well in effect today, and it goes all the way back to the beginning of humanity. And I want to get clear on what those two things are, because I think it's run rampant. Not just in humanity, but even in the church today, I see the sin of Cain and the curse of Cain is gaining momentum. It is not being overcome. I would assess that Cain's sin, though it was very, very evident by the time he murdered his brother, was not murder. The sin had already begun far before we got to that point. I think we would very rarely find anyone whose first problem in life began with murder. It is usually a trail that leads up to bigger and bigger escalating problems. And I think God looked at Cain and said, I see the problem and I know where this is going. And he asked Cain to overcome it, to acknowledge it, to do something about it. Here's what I believe that Cain struggled with. I believe that Cain made this life about himself. Now listen, he lived in a world, and he would have believed this, that was created by God. But in Colossians 1:16, we're told that not only was this world created by God, but it was created for God. And if we try to live as God's creation as though life was about us, if we begin to exist for our own purposes, we are going to get sucked into the sin of Cain. And in fact, I want you to understand what the result of living this life as though it was about you, as living this life and existing for yourself. God asked Cain, why are you angry and why are you downcast? See, God, with great precision, great beauty, great purpose, created mankind to exist for himself. Man will find his greatest joy as he delights in God, as he knows God deeply, as he believes in God, has faith in God, and walks with intimacy with God. Man's joy is going to come from his relationship with God. But when we sever that and we begin to live a life for ourselves and we try to find purpose existing on our own terms, we are going to inevitably struggle with anger and being downcast. Because what is the purpose of life apart from God? You cannot find life's purpose when you're living for yourself. And yet the message and the thrust of our culture and our society is, you only live once. Live it for yourself. Go have as much fun as you can. The crazy thing is as alluring as this world is, there is nothing there to offer that will bring us satisfaction. God has created us in such a way that we will only be fully satisfied in Him. So when we begin to live like we exist for our own good pleasure, we are going to be plagued with anger, frustration, depression, sadness, because life is not going to make sense. We're going to be wrestling with, is this all there is? And constantly looking for, there's got to be more. There is more. God has offered access to Himself, and He has offered a path to Himself. And outside of that, mankind is not going to find what they're looking for. It's the sin of Cain. And I want you to catch what the curse for this sin is. The curse of Cain is that God said in verse 12, you will be a restless wanderer. Cain was condemned to a life of wandering. Church, anyone who tries to find meaning for their life outside of knowing God closely will be condemned to a life of wandering, frustration, depression, anger, the whole thing. And it'll be so frustrating to them because they're always going to think, maybe I can find it over here. If I could just get one step further in this direction, if I could just fix this one issue in my life, then I could find the fulfillment, the satisfaction, the meaning that I've been desperately trying to find. And all they ever find is frustration. Excuse me. The sin of Cain was existing for himself, and the curse of Cain was being condemned to a life of wandering.